Let's talk about the 308 Winchester and also the 7.62x51 NATO. How have I never done an entire episode on the 308? What an egregious error on my part. Well, I seek to rectify that today on Gunfighter Life. So welcome, saddle up. We talk about the 308 on the podcast where we talk about guns, gunfighting, tactics, the right way, with God Almighty at the center, Judeo-Christian values, and real-world first-hand experience. I will put in a very short version of the bio. Much is left out of that, but I want to at least establish some street cred, some bona fides as to why you should listen to the podcast, why it's not just conjecture and opinion from an armchair. I think this episode may attract some new listeners that don't normally listen. So for that reason, I'm going to put in the bio. If you want to skip it, skip around a minute. And we'll get into talking about the 308. Bio. First and foremost, I am a Christian. That is number one in my life. Serving God. Following Jesus. Combat veteran. Served in the United States Marine Corps and the Army. Also law enforcement veteran, private contractor, state rifle and pistol champion. Professional big game hunter and guide. If you feel called to support, check out Patreon. There should be a link in the show notes. With that, I am your host, Michael Milito, and I am blessed to serve you today. Now, yeah, only the best production quality here. My over 100 and something pound Rhodesian Ridgeback is demanding attention from my wife and I. I am not one to bury the lead. I think 308 is the most versatile rifle cartridge, period. End of sentence. The 308 is the most versatile rifle cartridge, period. And some people may look at that and think, well, great, that must make it the best. And other people may look at that statement and say, well, maybe that just means it's not really good at any one thing. And I would say, yeah, that's also true. It is not really a specialist cartridge. Even when it came out, right, ballistically, there wasn't really anything that the 308 would do ballistically that the already venerable 30-06 wouldn't do. And the 30-06 is probably a more versatile 30 caliber hunting cartridge. And if you're talking about like long range, right, it's been outclassed easily by the 6.5 Creedmoor, and even after that, the 6.5 PRC or the 6mm Creedmoor, and all manner of now, because that discipline of long range shooting has become so popular. There are many cartridges that can outdo it past 800 yards. There are also obviously much more bigger, more powerful cartridges. The 30-06, whom it replaced with heavier bullets, is more powerful. The 300 Win Mag, the 300 WSM, Winchester Short Mag, and up, the 338s, the 35s, the 375 H&H, which long predates this cartridge. It was not the most powerful cartridge. Also, one of the reasons our military went away from the 308, it's not the lightest, easiest to carry cartridge. You can carry a lot more rounds of 5.56 than you can 308. So it's not the best intermediate cartridge. So because it's not an intermediate cartridge, it's a full powered rifle cartridge. It is much more powerful than 5.56. It's much more powerful even than 7.62x39. It's a full power rifle cartridge. It's not an intermediate cartridge. So it's not the best if you want a lightweight, handy, high volume of fire, high mobility, intermediate rifle, because it's not an intermediate rifle cartridge. But I say again, I think it is the most versatile of rifle cartridges, because it will do pretty much anything, which might make you think it's the most okayest rifle cartridge. And depending on your perspective, that is also true. It doesn't really shine at any one thing, but it's so good at so many other things. Nothing else bridges the gap between, let's say, a battle rifle full-fledged tactical rifle and a hunting rifle, like a 308. 308 is one of the top hunting calibers. It's one of the top military calibers. It's one of the top tactical calibers. No other bridges that gap. Yeah, you can hunt deer with a 5.56 with a 223. It's not a great idea, but 308 is a fantastic deer hunting cartridge. In fact, it's one of the top deer hunting cartridges. It's also, again, one of the top tactical cartridges. If you move up from the AR-15 to an AR-10 pattern, a SCAR 17, and even predating that, the FALs, the G3s, the HK91s, the M1A, the Fulton Armory guns, so many other full-powered, repeating firepower rifles in 308. 308 has been made in pretty much any kind of rifle, from a just bolt-action hunting rifle to a lever-action rifle, like a BLR, to your semi-auto not tactical rifles like a BAR, or a, Remington, I believe 740, 742. Great, not super tactical, but semi-auto hunting rifles. To your full-fledged, most coolest of the tactical rifles. Again, talking about the M1A. Moving on up the chain to, an AR-10. And what I would consider like the epitome of that, the best of the best, a SCAR 17. It's still the go-to caliber for our and many other militaries around the world for the medium machine guns. Even if it's not their main issue infantry rifle caliber, it's still very much as a medium machine gun caliber, as in like the 240 Golf, the 240 Bravo, and many others. And there's still plenty of rifles chambered in it. The amount of guns and ammunition turned out for this caliber during the Cold War all around the world means it's probably going to be on battlefields for a good long while. Likewise, although it's had some challengers as of late, most notably the 6.5 Creedmoor. I did a whole episode on the 6.5 Creedmoor versus 308. And you could argue there's really no reason to go with the 308 with the advent of the 6.5 Creedmoor. And I could see a good argument for that. If you want more on that, listen to that episode. However, economy of scale alone makes the 308 a lot of times a more practical choice. 6.5 Creedmoor outshines in a couple of different areas, most notably the long range, but let's be honest, how often do most people shoot past 800 yards? And inside 800 yards, a 308 will do it okay. Doing a quick search on AmmoSeek looking for 308 76 2x51, see ammo at 63.9 cents. So 60-something cents around, and there's quite a few in that 60-some cents range, and don't quote me on this in the future or even when this episode comes out. This is recorded on September 11th in the year of our Lord 2023. Prices change. Not necessarily about the price per round, but its comparative cost to other rifle calibers. 6.5 Creedmoor, 78 cents a round, and there's only one of those, and it goes up to 80-something cents a round. So you see a bit of disparity there. And not only just in cost, but that adds up when you start stacking, if you buy your ammo by the crate and not by the round or by the box at the local gun store. That's a real difference. If you actually go to like a training class and go through 2,000 rounds in a week, that cost does add up. That makes a difference. Also, availability. Although many other calibers are widely available, I don't think anything is more available in more places as a full-powered rifle round than 308. You might make the argument round per round, and probably true that there's more 5.56. But again, that's an intermediate round. Talking full-powered rifle round in a class of its own, the 308 really there's nothing else that's as available and as affordable, just from economy of scale standpoint. Even if ballistically there are other rounds that are better at a lot of things. Going back to the 30-06, similar search, you're starting out in the 80-something cents a round. And then quickly moving up to 90-something cents a round. That's quite a bit more than 60-something cents a round. Now, if you're talking about a straight bolt-action hunting rifle, yeah, that's not that big a deal because probably not shooting thousands of rounds in a week. Well, let's talk about the other advantages we touched on the 30-06. One of the big reasons the military went to it was the weight of the ammo itself and the weight of the rifle, I believe. And this is where you get into your standard length action, as in your classic 30-06, 270. Those length calibers, based on the 30-06. Or you might say, based on a Mauser, because we kind of copied that with the 30-06. But you get the idea. To a short action, which is what we call today a short action, the 308 and all its descendants, the 243, the 6.5 Creedmoor, which is technically not really a shoot off of it because it comes from the 30 Thompson Center, but it's not. It was made to fit in the 308 length action. 243, 6mm and 6.5 Creedmoor, 358 Winchester, the 260, and that short action. And I'm going to be honest, I think that in a bolt-action rifle, that's way overplayed. The weight difference in that little bit of an action, I think, is not that big a deal. And the weight savings round per round, if you're talking about a bolt-action rifle, how many rounds are you carrying? And does that really make a difference? If you're talking about running troops ashore on a small landing craft, you're talking about thousands of rounds, or soldiers being able to, farmers carry ammo cans, that weight does add up. When you're talking about you as a hunter maybe carrying 10 rounds or less, yeah, it's not. I think that's well overplayed. But it is something to consider. Also, the fact that since the short actions are kind of more common, and a lot of the custom builds, like the high-end actions, are built on those short actions. And a lot of people will say they're faster. I think that is overplayed, the quickness at which you can work a bolt. You can't argue that less is less, right? It's less distance you have to move that bolt, and it's less material that you need in the action of the gun. That does add up over time. So it is a short action cartridge. And most of, again, going to the tactical aspects, most of the tactical guns of today are built on that short action. So you can get a SCAR in 308, you can get it in 6.5 Creedmoor, you can get it, but it's going to be in that short action. The AR-10, it's going to be in a short action. I think there have been some offshoots, but you're probably not getting a lot of tactical rifles, unless you consider the M1 Garand still a tactical rifle, in the 30-06 length action. Just not going to happen. Now, I guess now we should look at discussing the 308 versus the 7.62x51 NATO. And this is often confusing, especially when it's compared to the 5.56, because in the 5.56 and the 223, it is generally considered safe that anything chambered in 5.56 will also shoot 223, the civilian designation. But the 308 Winchester and the 7.62x51 are actually the reverse of that. Commercial 308 Winchester can be loaded to a higher standard than 7.62x51 NATO. So if you got a 308 chambered gun, you should be good to go. For all intents and purposes, the 308 is the civilian nomenclature for the 7.62x51 NATO. If you have like a military surplus gun that's a bit older, or it's been converted or something to 7.62x51, use your due diligence and research, but the 308 is the civilian vernacular for that round. Now, let's look at some actual capability and numbers. We're going to get a little bit nerdy here, and I'm going to go to Wikipedia. So take this information with a grain of Varget or whatever powder you reload your .308 Winchester with. As per Wikipedia, designed in 1952, which is about the time we were looking to replace the old M1 Garand, very good rifle, but a little long in the tooth, with a shorter, more efficient cartridge. And a .308 is a very efficient cartridge. Anyway, going back to the Wikipedia, it says designed in 1952. And kind of how I keep the .308 when I'm comparing ballistics in my head, a real easy number, 150 grain, it lists here at 2820. I just generally remember that as 150 at 2800. Not exactly correct, but pretty close if I'm comparing it to other rounds. So 150 at 2800. That's respectable. That is a good ballistically capable round. And the 150 is kind of your most common. I know a lot of the military surplus is going to be a 147 grain, but let's be honest, 47 and 150 grains pretty close enough for math to do in your head. But that 147 Full Metal Jacket is a classic military loading, and the 150 is probably your most common .308 loading on the civilian side if you're not buying military surplus. And a 150, not Full Metal Jacket, I know I shouldn't have to say that, but I will anyway. Not Full Metal Jacket, but 150 grain, properly constructed hunting bullet, even if it's a simple cup and core, like a core lock or a power shock. Those are phenomenal bullets on medium and even a little bit larger game. They're phenomenal. Whitetail, mule deer, blacktail, pronghorn, and yes, even up to elk. You don't need a 300 Win Mag to hunt elk. Coming from somebody that's been a professional big game hunter and guide. If you want to shoot an elk with a 300 Win Mag, go ahead. If you want to shoot a whitetail deer with a 300 Win Mag, go ahead. But a .308 is sufficient. However, if I was looking for an optimal load to hunt something bigger, I would go with a bigger bullet. 168 grain is kind of a sweet spot with a .308. You're looking at 168 grain per Wikipedia at 2650, and that's a good number. I would take the heavier bullet. I like the more mass for the bigger animal. But that 168 grain is kind of a sweet spot. You still get enough powder capacity. And I actually kind of prefer those moderate velocities. I like the 25, even 24, 25, 26, 100 feet a second for most of my game hunting. I'm not one of these ultra long range hunt off a tripod kind of guy. I'm more of a spot and stalk and still hunt kind of guy. I prefer beefier bullets at a moderate velocity. I like just the way those perform ballistically. That's just me. You do you. Moving up, a lot of the long-range shooting guys will move up to 175 grain bullet with a high ballistics coefficient, like a boat tail hollow point with a high BC. And there are many companies that make those. And you're mostly doing that to maintain that velocity and maintain that trajectory and buck that wind a little bit better. They're just a sleeker bullet. BC, ballistics coefficient, is just a fancy term to say how well the bullet flies through the air. And you can, of course, go lighter and go heavier, especially if you hand load, which, if you're serious about shooting and stuff like that, I would encourage you to look into hand loading. But you can go down, you can go up. I don't think you can find any commercially available 200 grain .308 loads, but I know that you certainly can hand load for them because I've done it, and they're one of my go-to bear loads. That said, I currently prefer to go the 30-06 route with a 220 grain bullet, but you can load quite heavy in a .308, and you can also load quite a bit down. So if you're looking for a really versatile cartridge, the .308 is hard to beat. You might argue of just strict 30 calibers if you're just looking at hunting. The 30-06 is probably more versatile, and I would grant you that, especially in heavier bullet weights. You have bigger powder capacity. The .308 is more efficient, but when you talk about the super heavy bullets, you're better off with a 30-06. That said, most people don't have any desire for those heavier bullets. And again, going back to economy of scale, the .308 is really, really hard to beat. Yeah, it is kind of okay at everything, but I think that makes it really good overall. I think it's a really good overall cartridge. Now, I think I'm going to do an episode on top 308 rifles available in 2023, and that probably would get a lot of clicks and a lot of views and whatever. And if I was into getting a bunch of clicks and a bunch of views, I would put that out because it probably would. However, I care more about the patrons, so I'm going to put that episode out, top 308 rifles available in different categories in 2023 for the patrons. If you want to listen to that, you can become a patron for $1. For $1, you can become a patron. If you think just that episode is worth $1, you can sign up, listen to the episode, and cancel it if you want. But there's also a lot of other cool insider content on there, not to mention the fact that you can kind of converse with me if you think that's worth $1. So consider becoming a patron. There should be a link in the show notes. They'll get that before you listen to this. They'll also get this episode before you listen to this, all commercial free. If you want that and you want to be part of the tribe and support the podcast and you want to be able to ask questions and be part of an insider chat, all that stuff, mostly because you enjoy the podcast and you want to support it, consider becoming a patron. Again, they get cool insider content. When you become a patron, you can scroll back and see, that top 308 rifles episode and a bunch of other just insider-only content for patrons. Anyway, with that, that's going to bring us to the tactical tip of the day. Now, getting into the tactical tip of the day, I like to nerd out on rifles as much as the next guy. Is the current Winchester Model 70 controlled round feed better for me than the push feed, but also really good Browning X-Bolt? And then if so, does the X-Bolt warrant the greater cost because it's just a 3-lug push feed design over the cost of a Tikka and all that kind of stuff, minutia at nausea. I get that. I'm that guy too. But what a lot of people don't nerd out on is bullet construction, especially with 308. 308 is so common and so ubiquitous, but not all 308 projectiles are the same. Going back to that 300 Win Mag, I would rather have a 308 with really good optimal bullet construction, let's say something like a nozzler partition on a larger game animal, than a 300 Win Mag with just garbage bullet construction technology. I've seen, as a professional big game hunter and guide, plenty of animals shot with big magnums. And let me tell you, there's not enough power in those big magnums to, 1, make up for poor shot placement, and 2, make up for crap bullet construction. Be judicious or more so about the construction of that actual projectile, because that's what, God willing, will hit that animal than this rifle versus that rifle. I think it's more important. It's hard to find somebody that makes a bad, let's say, bolt action rifle today. If you're talking about the tactical application, the same thing goes. The military uses full metal jacket because they do, right? For reasons that don't really apply to you. Unless you sign the Hague Convention of, I think, 1898, you don't live by those rules, right? So if you have it for a tactical role, my advice to you would be don't buy, unless you're just doing it to stockpile it and shoot it in a class, don't have as your go-to defensive ammo ball, like M80 ball. Like, that's not designed for what you want to do with it. Have good defensive ammo. Again, primary thing on that, bullet construction. A really good, proven defensive round. And there are plenty in the 308. Be judicious on your bullet construction. That is my tactical tip for you. Tactical verse of the day. I'm very blessed that I get to read the Bible to my wife. Right now we're working through the story of Samson in the book of Judges. If you're a warrior, if you are a fighter, likely you appreciate, even if it is a sad story, the story of Samson. Bringing us to the verse today. When he came to Lehi, the Philistines came shouting against him. Then the Spirit of the Lord came mightily upon him, and the ropes that were on his arms became like flax that is burned with fire. And his bonds broke loose from his hands. he found a fresh jawbone of a donkey, reached out his hand and took it, and killed 1,000 men with it. I'm going to read part of that again. The Spirit of the Lord came mightily upon him. Make sure we have a right view of Christianity and God and violence. It is written, Exodus 15, the Lord is a man of war. The Spirit of the Lord came upon Samson, and he killed 1,000 men. Also notice, he did it with the jawbone of a donkey. The mark of a great warrior is not so much the weapons that he uses, but actually being a warrior, walking the walk, being courageous, being strong. Make sure that is our focus in life, following God, being a warrior for Him for the right reasons in the right way. That should be the main focus, not the weapon itself. Also, just for all the young men out there, I'd encourage you to read the story of Samson and be cautious of pairing with the wrong women. That is a deep pit that you ought not fall into. Anyway, with that, thanks for listening and have a blessed day.